Robert Wone. On the night of August 2nd, 2006, Robert Eric Wone, the 32-year-old attorney and general counsel for Radio Free Asia, was staying overnight at a friend's home in Washington's upscale DuPont Circle. He had known Joseph Price since their college days at William and Mary and needed a place to stay after working late in the city. Price offered up his row house at 15009 Swan Street, which he shared with partner Victor Zaborski and housemate Dylan Ward. Robert arrived with his work belongings, looking forward to a quiet night of rest before returning to his wife Catherine the next morning. At around 11:49 that evening, Zaborski dialed 911, reporting that an intruder had broken in and attacked their guests. When first responders arrived at the row house, they found Robert lying face up on a pull-out sofa in the second-floor guest room. He had been stabbed 3 times in the chest, with one deep wound piercing his heart. Paramedics quickly realized that Robert had likely been dead long before the emergency call was even made. But what investigators found inside was far more disturbing than what was missing, presenting immediate and glaring contradictions. Despite the severity of Robert's injuries, there was almost no blood at the scene. His body appeared to have been washed, changed into a fresh shirt, and carefully positioned on the bed. Strangely, the clean shirt showed 0 damage from the knife that ended his life. When EMTs arrived, all 3 roommates had recently showered and displayed what responders described as an unusual calmness, especially considering the horrific events they claimed had just unfolded. FBI fiber analysis revealed that the knife found at the scene had fibers matching a towel near Robert's bed, suggesting blood had been wiped onto the blade instead of resulting from the actual attack. A knife was also missing from a cutlery block in Dylan's bedroom, which closely matched Robert's wounds, and it was never found. The autopsy revealed several needle marks on Robert's neck, chest, foot, and hand, with fresh bruising indicating he was still alive when injected. Investigators believed he had been drugged with some substance before being killed, though toxicology tests failed to find any trace of paralytic agents. However, experts noted some compounds metabolize rapidly and can quickly become completely undetectable. How could someone be stabbed to death inside a house with 3 roommates home, yet nobody heard a thing? Why was the scene spotless despite his massive wounds? And why did clues suggest he was washed and changed after he died? And where was the knife that actually took his life? The home had an advanced security system, yet no alarms were triggered that night. There was 0 signs of forced entry at any door or window, and nothing valuable was stolen. The back door, supposedly used by the killer, showed no signs of tampering. Strikingly, the chime meant to sound upon opening had been manually shut off earlier that night. According to the system logs, the 3 roommates were charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. At their 2010 trial, Judge Lynn Leovitz acquitted all 3 men, but stated she personally believed the men knew exactly who killed Robert, though she wasn't convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of their legal guilt on those charges. In 2011, Robert's widow, Catherine, filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $20 million. Under oath, all 3 defendants pleaded the fifth to every question, including whether they had killed Robert Wone. The lawsuit was settled for an undisclosed sum. A 2023 documentary renewed attention on the case. Price, now Joseph Anderson, works in Miami. Ward, now Dylan Thomas, practices bodywork in Fort Lauderdale. 18 years later, the big questions remain. What truly happened to Robert in those crucial hours? Who was responsible? And why has justice never been served? Our next mystery takes us to the vast California desert, where witnesses spotted a young teen just before she vanished, Karlie Guse. On October 13, 2018, in the remote White Mountain estates of Chount Valley, California, Karlie Guse vanished from her family home after a night of intense paranoia. This region is deeply isolated, surrounded by endless high desert with the massive White Mountains looming to the west. With Death Valley lying to the south, 3 separate witnesses spotted her walking toward Highway 6 at dawn, clutching a piece of paper and staring up at the sky. And then, she vanished into the vast desert without a trace, as if the landscape had swallowed her whole. The night before her disappearance, Karlie went to a party in Bishop, 15 miles away, where she took an unknown substance with her boyfriend Donald Arrowood III. Her physical reaction was swift and severe. Overwhelmed by extreme paranoia, she frantically messaged her boyfriend to ask if the dose had been altered, terrified that something dangerous was mixed inside. Her concerned stepmother, Melissa Guse, got a call about her state and rushed to Bishop to pick her up around 9 p.m. On the drive back through the pitch-black desert, Karlie remained profoundly agitated, unable to calm down despite her stepmother's reassurance. Back at the house, Melissa spent hours trying to comfort the terrified teen. Terrified for Karlie's mental state, Melissa recorded about 8 minutes of their conversation to document the bizarre behavior. In these recordings, which investigators would later analyze, the teenager said some deeply unsettling things. She screamed that Melissa was going to hurt her, asking repeatedly if she would survive until morning. She rambled about demonic visions and terrifying thoughts flooding her mind. Melissa stayed by her side, trying to ground her in reality and reminding her this trip was only temporary. By 5:45 a.m., as the first light of dawn broke in the east, Karlie finally seemed to calm down. The paralyzing terror was fading, and she could hold brief, coherent conversations again. Completely exhausted, Karlie fell asleep in her room, and Melissa finally went to bed too. But when Melissa woke up around 7 a.m., Karlie had vanished, leaving her cell phone on the kitchen counter. She had slipped out without it, with no ID, and no way to survive a brutal desert climate known for freezing nights and scorching days. Yet, 3 separate witnesses, who didn't know each other, independently claimed they saw her near Highway 6, providing identical descriptions of her. She was clutching a piece of paper, staring down at it every few steps. Her head was tilted back, her eyes constantly searching the sky as if watching something overhead. Her odd behavior made her impossible to forget. Nobody stopped to help a decision they would deeply regret. Soon, massive search teams were deployed to the area. Scent dogs were brought to the house, sniffing her worn clothing to catch her trail. The animals caught the scent and traced it toward Highway 6, following her exact path as described by witnesses. But right at the edge of the asphalt, the trail went cold. The dogs lost her. A week-long search followed, using thermal choppers, over 60 rescue workers, and search dogs combing every sector. Still, not a single trace of Karlie was ever found in that barren desert. When investigators tested the substance from the party, results came back completely clean, with no dangerous additives. It was exactly what it was supposed to be. Both Melissa and Karlie's biological father, Zachary Guse, willingly took polygraph tests. Both passed with absolutely no signs of deception. Forensic phone data from the family fully backed up their timeline and story. All the evidence pointed to the family telling the complete truth. In 2021, a witness claimed to have spotted Karlie at a gathering in Tonopah, Nevada, 100 miles away. Investigators reportedly tracked down a vehicle that might have driven her away from Highway 6. A 2023 documentary revealed a potential suspect exists, and evidence has been processed, but no arrests have been made. The FBI still lists Karlie as an endangered missing person, offering a $5,000 reward. Her family added $20,000 more. An age progression photo from 2022 shows what she might look like today. Today, Karlie would be 22 years old. We have to ask, how does someone walk toward a highway in daylight, get spotted by 3 witnesses, and completely vanish? If someone picked her up from that desert road, who was it and why? Karlie vanished in broad daylight, but this next mystery centers on a terrifying distress call from a dark Texas highway. For over 11 years, Brandon Lawson's disappearance gripped detectives, all because of one haunting piece of evidence, a desperate 911 call, where he seemed to be fleeing from an unknown threat in the pitch-black night. The frantic audio was choked with pure terror. In December 2024, his family got their answer when skeletal remains found 2 years prior were matched to him through DNA. Yet this grim discovery only deepened the dark puzzle of what truly happened on that empty road. The 26-year-old oilfield worker left his San Angelo, Texas home around midnight on August 9, 2013, after an argument with his girlfriend, Ladessa Lofton. Such fights were not uncommon, but this time Brandon decided he simply needed to clear his head. He dialed his father in Crowley, roughly 170 miles north, saying he was driving up to visit. His father expected to see him arrive sometime in the early morning hours. Soon after hitting the road, Brandon phoned his brother Kyle with bad news. He was stranded, out of gas on Highway 277 near Bronte. But then came the terrifying part. He claimed unknown people were chasing him, trying to run him off the road. Confused and deeply worried, Kyle pressed him for details. Brandon just repeated his frantic plea. He was out of fuel, and people were hunting him. It made absolutely no sense. Why would anyone hunt down a stranger who merely ran out of gas? Kyle urged him to stay put and promised to drive out to find him. At 12:50 that morning, Brandon dialed 911. That call would become one of the most heavily analysed recordings in modern true crime history. It lasted under a minute. Over the years, audio experts have scrubbed the tape to pull out every muffled word. He gasped that he was lost in a field, surrounded by pitch darkness. His truck was dead, another car was there, and someone was actively chasing him through the dark woods. He begged for police to hurry. The operator asked if anyone was injured, but the call suddenly cut to dead silence. Brandon never spoke again. When Kyle reached the empty truck 20 minutes later, he immediately dialed his brother. To his shock, Brandon answered. He whispered that he could see Kyle right there, hiding close enough to watch him standing by the abandoned truck. He claimed he was hurt and bleeding, but refused to explain why. Imagine Kyle standing on that dark, empty highway, staring at his brother's abandoned truck. He scanned the tree line, desperately yelling Brandon's name into the dark. No one walked out. The only answer was the cold wind and the chilling howl of distant coyotes. Soon, a Cobb County Sheriff's deputy pulled up next to Kyle. Together, they swept the dark brush with flashlights, calling out his name, but they found absolutely nothing. It turned out Brandon had an active warrant for drug possession. Police believe that when Brandon saw the flashing police lights, he hid in the brush to avoid jail. But that meant believing he would hide from the very help he begged for, while actively bleeding and injured. At exactly 1 a.m, Brandon's phone pinged its final tower. After that, the device went totally dead, never connecting to the network again. For over 11 years, despite massive search efforts, not a single trace of Brandon was found. Devastated volunteers and family members combed the rough brush around Highway 277 over and over. Tracking dogs and professional teams with high-tech gear searched the area, yet found nothing. Detectives endlessly replayed the 911 call, hiring audio specialists to dissect every second for clues. Then, in February 2022, a private search team stumbled upon clothes matching what Brandon wore. Texas Rangers searched deeper, uncovering partial skeletal remains just 300 yards from his abandoned truck. On Christmas Day 2024, DNA confirmed the remains were indeed Brandon Lawson. His cause of death remains unknown. Kyle later admitted Brandon had used meth that night, which could explain the extreme paranoia. Still, some forensic experts insist they can hear a second voice hiding in the static. You and I have to wonder what happened in those critical minutes before his phone went dead. Was he fleeing real killers? Or just a dark shadow created in his own mind? A memorial service was planned for August 2025 in Burles, Texas. But while Brandon vanished on a dark highway, this next case brings something completely impossible caught on security footage. Brian Shaffer. On the night of April 1st, 2006, his disappearance created an impossible mystery that has baffled detectives for 20 years. Security cameras caught the 27-year-old medical student entering the ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar near Ohio State University's campus. The footage shows him walking right through the door with a clear timestamp. Yet those same cameras, filming all night, never caught him walking out. Every single customer who entered was accounted for on the exit tapes, everyone, except Brian. He vanished into thin air somewhere between the entrance and the exit. The Ohio State University med student was only in his second year, celebrating spring break just 3 weeks after losing his mother to a painful illness. He was still drowning in grief while managing his heavy academic workload. He met up with his friends at the ugly Tuna Saloona, a popular bar on the second floor. Around 10 o'clock that evening, he dialed his girlfriend, Alexis Wagner, to confirm their upcoming trip to Miami, a getaway to help him heal. The call was normal and happy. They talked about final details and confirmed their flights. Then he went back to drinking and laughing with friends, a brief escape from his deep grief and school stress. At 1:55 in the morning, security cameras captured Brian in what would be his final moments on film. He was standing just outside the bar, chatting with 2 mystery women who have never been found, despite endless police searches. The video shows Brian looking relaxed and smiling. Then he turned away from the camera, stepped out of the frame, and walked back inside the bar. After that single moment, Brian vanished, never to be seen again. When closing time hit at 2 in the morning, his friend Clint Florence couldn't find him. The staff cleaning up hadn't seen him either. Clint tried calling Brian's phone over and over, sending a text at 2:10 a.m. asking where he was. There was no response. That text was the last signal his phone ever sent before going dead forever. He missed his Monday morning flight to Miami, which was totally unlike him, since he was always responsible and incredibly excited for the trip. Alexis filed a missing persons report when he never showed up. Lead investigator Andre Edwards began scouring the security tapes. The detective declared with absolute certainty that Brian never walked out of the main entrance. The lenses recorded every single soul leaving through those doors all night long. Brian was not one of them. The venue had only one service door, which led to a construction zone. Police thought Brian might have stumbled into that messy construction site, confused, and managed to slip out that way. Yet search dogs trained to find bodies swept the place and came up empty. How does someone walk right into a building on camera, yet never walk out while those same cameras keep rolling? The security system worked perfectly all night. Every other guest who walked in was filmed walking out. But Brian's departure was never seen. Did he slip through the construction site and get ambushed outside? Or did something happen inside the bar itself? And why was no trace of him ever found? The case shifted when Brian's close friend Clint Florence refused to take a lie detector test for detectives. Following the strict advice of his defense lawyer, Florence refused the polygraph. He also stopped talking to police after giving his first statement. Eventually, he packed up and moved to Tennessee, telling reporters that all future questions must go through his lawyer. Everyone else close to the case voluntarily took and passed their polygraph tests. Sadly, Brian's father, Randy, never learned what happened to his son. He passed away in 2008 when a tree fell on him during a severe storm. Following Randy's death, someone signed his online memorial, claiming to be Brian, alive in the United States Virgin Islands. Detectives traced the IP address to a public computer in Franklin County, but the sender was never found. In 2021, police shared an age-progressed photo showing what Brian might look like at 42. The FBI still keeps his profile active in their missing persons database. Local police confirm this cold case remains open for review, but admit there have been no real breakthroughs in nearly 19 years. Security cameras capture him walking in, but they never show him leaving. And Brian Shaffer remains lost forever somewhere between those two moments. While Brian vanished from a crowded bar, this next case follows a student who disappeared right from her own apartment. On November 1st, 2001, a Penn State senior named Hyun Jang-song, known as Cindy to her friends, vanished from State College, Pennsylvania, after celebrating Halloween night out with them. She was last seen getting dropped off at her apartment around 4 a.m., still wearing parts of a Halloween costume. Clues inside suggest she made it home safely. Her fake eyelashes were left on the bathroom counter, and the backpack she carried that night was resting in her bedroom. Yet, after arriving, she apparently slipped back outside and vanished completely into the cold Pennsylvania night. 23 years later, her disappearance stands as one of the university's most haunting unsolved cold cases. The 21-year-old South Korean student was studying integrative arts, a program blending performance, design, and digital media. She worked 2 different part-time jobs at the same time, balancing a heavy class load and helping out with several student groups. Even with this hectic routine, she kept good grades and close friends. She had already signed up for her next semester's classes. She ordered a new computer set to arrive in 2 weeks and even bought tickets to a Britney Spears concert. Her entire life was geared toward the future, full of ambitious goals and solid commitments. This was not a girl planning to run away. So when Cindy missed her shifts and skipped classes without a word, an act totally unlike the reliable girl they knew, her panicked friends reported her missing on November 4th. Arriving officers found her apartment door locked tight, with no signs of a break-in. Everything inside was neat and untouched, but her purse was gone, along with her wallet, credit cards, and identification. Her keys were also missing, but strangely, her cell phone was still sitting inside her backpack on the floor. Detectives theorized that Cindy went back outside in the quiet pre-dawn hours, maybe to walk to a nearby 24-hour convenience store, when she crossed paths with an abductor. In 2003, a chilling connection finally came to light. A prison informant came forward with a terrifying story. He claimed 2 men snatched Cindy off the street that night, keeping her trapped in a hidden basement vault on a rural farm until she died. Even worse, he claimed one of the kidnappers kept parts of her bunny costume as sick trophies of the crime. When police raided that property in northeastern Pennsylvania, they walked right into an absolute nightmare. Investigators discovered 5 bodies buried in the yard, but despite digging up the entire property, forensics confirmed Cindy was not among the victims found. The informant's story crumbled when detectives realized he had spent hours researching Cindy's case online before talking to them. He likely made up the whole story using public news details. One of the suspects named by the informant, a dangerous repeat offender with a long criminal history, is currently serving life behind bars for other crimes. Though never charged in connection with Cindy's disappearance, detectives still consider him a key person of interest in this active investigation. In 2013, the FBI worked with global agencies to secure DNA samples from Cindy's biological parents back in South Korea. Those genetic profiles were uploaded to national databases, where they sit today, waiting for a match against any unidentified remains found in the future. Anywhere in America, this haunting case remains open and active. Even though leads have dried up over the years, Detective Jonathan Mayer admits he still can't escape Cindy's disappearance, constantly playing the mystery over in his head, even during his personal time. He remains utterly haunted by the case. What truly happened after Cindy got home from Halloween and took off her costume? Why would she step back outside into the cold, without even grabbing her cell phone? If she bumped into a familiar face on the street, who was it, and why have they stayed silent? And if she was snatched from that quiet college town, where did they take her? 6 days before she vanished, Cindy shared a piece of creative writing on her personal website. It was a poem full of contradictions, words that now read like a chilling, dark premonition. Yet she could never have known what terrible fate awaited her. 23 years have passed since Cindy Song walked out of her state college apartment into the November chill, leaving her family in South Korea to grieve without any closure. Detectives still hope that someone, somewhere, will finally speak up. Until then, the truth about Cindy Song remains buried deep, waiting to be brought to light. But while Cindy vanished from an American college town, our next case takes us across the Atlantic, to a small island where a teen uttered a chilling warning. Damian Nettles. On November 2nd, 1996, the teenager vanished after a night out in Cowes, a small port town on the Isle of Wight, just off England's southern coast. For almost 30 years, his disappearance has been plagued by shocking police blunders and critical evidence lost or destroyed, fueled by dark rumours of a cover-up involving local drug dealers. Several witnesses spotted Damian that night. Security cameras captured him at 12:02 a.m., walking down High Street, his final movements frozen on grainy tape. Then, he walked out of frame and simply vanished. 28 years later, not a single trace has ever been found, on an island so tiny you can drive across it in under an hour. Earlier, the teenager had spent the evening at a house party with his friends. It was a typical Saturday night for kids on the isolated island, where there was rarely much to do. After the party, he took a ferry back to Cowes, where his family lived. People who crossed paths with him that night later reported he seemed heavily intoxicated, stumbling as he walked. He was struggling to keep his balance. Some suspected he had taken more than just alcohol, noting his dilated pupils and increasingly bizarre, erratic behaviour. As he stumbled through the dark streets, several onlookers saw him trying to open the doors of parked cars, yanking on handles and staring through the glass in a state of utter confusion. At one point during his erratic walk, Damian approached a stranger sitting inside a parked car. He tapped on the glass and uttered words that would forever haunt those who heard them. He leaned in and warned the driver that they were both being watched. It was a terrifying, paranoid warning. Who exactly was watching them? Why did he believe they were under surveillance? Was it just drug-induced paranoia? Or had he spotted a real lurking threat? After dropping that chilling warning, Damian wiped the rain off the car window with his hand, before turning and walking away toward High Street, vanishing into the cold November night. That driver would be one of the very last people to see him alive. From the very start, the police investigation was an absolute disaster. Responding officers made a massive mistake right away, registering him in their system as an adult rather than a 16-year-old child. Because of this clerical blunder, his disappearance failed to trigger the urgent protocols required for a missing child. Crucial security camera, tapes from around Cowes that could have shown where Damian went after High Street were never saved, eventually getting recorded over and lost forever. To make matters worse, Emergency call logs from that fateful night simply vanished. Police shift logs and original notebooks containing crucial first-day observations somehow disappeared from evidence lockers. Hampshire police would eventually issue a formal public apology for the destroyed evidence, but hollow words couldn't recover the wiped tapes, the shredded records, or the vital clues that could have solved this case decades ago. Today, the lead theory points to a local player heavily involved in the town's illegal drug trade. A local underworld informant eventually came forward with a dark story. This informant claimed that a local man and Damian argued possibly over cash or drugs, until things turned violent. During the fight, the man landed a blow that accidentally ended Damian's life. Panicked, they hid Damian's body for about 3 weeks in a spot tied to illegal activity. Later, a local councillor told detectives that Damian had been taken to a nearby bungalow. He lost consciousness after the fight, and his body was wrapped in a rug and plastic bags before being moved. When the prime suspect died of a drug overdose in 2002, several people claimed he made a deathbed confession just before drawing his final breath, but those rumours were second-hand and impossible to verify. Then, 15 years after Damian vanished, in 2011, investigators arrested 8 people, suspecting they conspired to cover up what had happened to him. But all 8 suspects were eventually released without any charges. Prosecutors determined there was not enough physical evidence to move forward. Damian's mother, Valerie, eventually left the Isle of Wight for the United States, settling near Dallas, Texas. From there, she has never stopped fighting for answers, running a dedicated website about Damian's case, and even publishing a book about his disappearance in 2019. In 2024, a cold case unit at Canterbury Christ Church University teamed up with Locate International to review the case. Yet despite their analysis, no breakthrough emerged. The Isle of Wight is just 23 miles from east to west and 13 miles north to south. A person can drive from one end to the other in well under an hour. On this tiny island, communities are close-knit, and it feels like everyone knows everyone else. Yet in 28 years, not a single trace of Damian Nettles has ever turned up on that small island. No clothing, no remains, no personal items. What did Damian actually mean when he told a witness that they were being watched? Who was the last person to see him alive after he passed that camera? And if the informant was right, where was Damian's body finally taken? The Isle of Wight has kept its secrets about what happened to Damian Nettles for nearly 3 decades. While Damian vanished on a tiny island, the next case unfolds as an international mystery at a hotel with a dark history. Elisa Lam. In early 2013, this young Canadian tourist became the centre of an international mystery that gripped millions around the world. Her body was ultimately discovered inside a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel, one of downtown Los Angeles' most notorious buildings. Weeks before her body was discovered, security footage from inside the hotel went viral, showing Elisa behaving in deeply unsettling, inexplicable ways. She frantically pressed elevator buttons, hid in corners, and made bizarre hand gestures, seeming utterly terrified of something the camera never captured. Her death was eventually ruled an accidental drowning by the county coroner, who cited her diagnosed bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. But questions remain. How did a 21-year-old woman access a secured rooftop? How did she open the heavy water tank lid? And how did she get inside a tank reached only by scaling a 10-foot ladder? Elisa was a University of British Columbia student visiting from Vancouver, Canada. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, managing it with prescription medication, and was now traveling alone through California. It was a carefully planned solo trip, which she documented through social media and her personal blog. On January 28, 2013, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, located in a dangerous area of downtown Los Angeles. The hotel was already infamous, once acting as a temporary home for serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Ontavega. For decades, the building had a dark reputation for attracting troubled souls and hosting numerous tragic incidents. Elisa initially shared a dormitory-style room with a few other travelers, but after her roommates complained to hotel staff about her strange, erratic behavior, which included leaving weird notes telling them to get out, she was moved into a private room for the rest of her stay. On January 31st, she spent part of her day visiting the last bookstore in downtown Los Angeles. Later that evening, the Cecil Hotel's elevator security camera captured her in footage destined to be viewed millions of times. The recording lasts about 4 minutes. Inside the elevator, Elisa stands alone, repeatedly pressing buttons on the control panel, seemingly desperate to make the carriage move. She shrinks back into the corner, partially hidden, as if trying to conceal herself from someone in the hallway. Then, she cautiously peers around the doorframe, scanning the empty corridor. Moving in and out of the elevator, she constantly checks the hallway, as if expecting someone to appear. She begins making strange, erratic gestures with her arms and hands. Strangely, the heavy elevator doors, which usually close within seconds, remain open for an inexplicably long time. The footage cuts off as she walks away into the hallway. She was never seen alive again. For 19 days after her sudden disappearance, Elisa remained missing while the hotel continued business as usual. During those 19 days, hotel guests began complaining to the front desk about strange problems with the water. Throughout the entire building, the water pressure had dropped significantly. Taps flowed with discolored water, showing a dark, murky brown or black tint. Most disturbing of all, guests complained of a foul, unpleasant taste that made them refuse to drink it or brush their teeth. Others reported a terrible smell. Yet, despite mounting complaints, more than 2 weeks passed before maintenance finally checked the rooftop water tanks. On February 19th, maintenance worker Santiago Lopez climbed up to the hotel's rooftop to investigate the persistent plumbing complaints. There sat 4 massive cylindrical water tanks that supplied the entire building's water supply. Lopez scaled the service ladder to inspect the tanks and noticed one of the heavy lids was slightly askew. Looking inside, he discovered Elisa's body floating face up in the water. She was entirely unclothed, with her garments and personal items drifting in the dark water around her. Authorities were summoned immediately, and the gruesome find captured international headlines within hours. The official autopsy performed by the Los Angeles County coroner found absolutely no signs of physical trauma, no evidence of sexual assault, and no illegal drugs in her system. However, detailed toxicology reports revealed she was severely under-medicating for her bipolar disorder, taking far less than prescribed, or perhaps stopping her regimen entirely. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning, with her mental health condition noted as a major factor. Investigators theorized that Elisa suffered a severe manic episode triggered by her mental health struggles, likely brought on by her sudden failure to maintain her required medication. In this altered state, she somehow made it to the secure rooftop, scaled the ladder, opened the heavy lid, and climbed inside. Skeptics quickly questioned the physical logistics of the police's official theory. How could someone in a panicked state lift such a heavy water tank lid? It weighed at least 20 pounds. Furthermore, the tank could only be reached by a 10-foot ladder, which wasn't even near the tank when they found her. Beyond that, the roof door was supposed to be locked and fully alarmed. Police search dogs deployed during the initial missing persons investigation thoroughly combed the roof. Yet they completely missed her scent, though. A sealed lid might have trapped any trace of her. The Cecil Hotel closed for good in 2017. The property sat empty until 2021, when it was renovated into affordable housing, trying to wash away its dark history. In 2024, the building was listed for sale. A viral documentary series about Elisa's death reignited intense public obsession, yet brought no real answers. What was she actually doing in that elevator for 4 minutes? Why did the doors fail to close? How did she bypass security to reach the roof? How did she lift that massive lid? And how did she manage to get inside a water tank that required so much effort to reach? Millions of people have analysed those 4 minutes of footage, hunting for any hidden clue. Still, nothing explains how Elisa Lam ended up inside that tank, or if her tragic death was truly a simple accident. If you have made it this far, and love exploring these dark, mysterious cases with us, please hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Even though Elisa's death was ruled accidental, our next story follows a diver who plunged into an underwater cave and simply vanished into the abyss. His name was Ben McDaniel. On August 18th, 2010, he entered Florida's Vortex Spring Cave and never came back up. For 36 days, 16 expert divers searched every inch of those dark passages. They found absolutely nothing. Still, there was no sign he ever left the water alive. The 30-year-old's disappearance fueled rumours of a tragic accident, a staged escape, or even cold-blooded murder. 14 years later, the mystery of what happened in those pitch-black depths remains completely unsolved. The Tennessee native was reeling from a painful divorce and a failed business, He stayed at his family's Florida beach house, trying to figure out his next move. In this fragile state of mind, he grew obsessed with diving at Vortex Spring. It was a famous Florida dive site, but Ben lacked proper cave certification. That did not stop him from bypassing the locked gate at the entrance. A safety gate installed after 13 divers lost their lives there during the 1990s. A sign at the entrance depicted the Grim Reaper, warning in bold letters that nothing in the cave was worth losing your life over. Ben ignored the warnings, plunging into the darkness without any real training. He lacked the proper credentials, and rarely told anyone where he was going. On August 18th, a Spring employee named Eduardo Tran unlocked the gate for Ben around 7:30 p.m., granting him access. Tran and his co-worker Chuck Cronin watched from the surface as Ben descended into the water, his dive lights glowing as he headed to the cave entrance 20 feet below. Then, they made a decision that investigators would question for years. They packed up and left without waiting for the young diver to surface. They just assumed he would get out safely and lock the gate behind him. Ben's truck sat in the parking lot for 2 entire days before anyone realized he was gone. When workers finally checked the truck, they found his cell phone, his license, and a wallet stuffed with $700 to $1,100 in cash. Detailed maps of the underwater cave passages lay spread across the front seat. All signs pointed to one conclusion: Ben fully planned on coming back. Ed Sorensen, one of the world's top underwater recovery specialists, was immediately brought in to search the treacherous cave for Ben's body. Sorensen pushed 1,700 feet into the cavern, going 200 feet past the deepest point marked on Ben's own maps. In those remote pitch-black chambers, Sorensen discovered 3 scuba tanks labelled with Ben's name and personal details. But there was no body, no extra gear, and no trace of a struggle. Later, Sorensen made a chilling statement that redefined the entire investigation. He reported that the deepest areas were completely pristine. There was not a single scratch, silt disturbance, or sign that any human had ever passed through. His expert conclusion was blunt: the young diver was simply not in there. How did Ben's gear end up deep in the cave if his body was nowhere to be found? Why was there zero evidence of a diver past those tanks? If Ben had drowned in that cave, where was his body? And if he never actually made it that deep, who put his tanks there? The case took a dark turn in January 2013, when Spring owner Lel Kelly died under suspicious circumstances after a supposed fall downstairs. The timing of his sudden death raised immediate red flags. At first, Kelly had cooperated with the police, but he soon clammed up when asked about the night Ben vanished. Ben's father suspected Kelly was hiding a dark secret. He publicly claimed that Kelly was killed to keep him from exposing the truth about Ben. A private investigator hired by the family eventually formulated a dark theory. He believed someone dragged Ben's body out of the cave before calling the police. This meant someone, perhaps Kelly or another insider, had retrieved the body themselves. They may have hidden it elsewhere to escape legal trouble, or to cover up what really happened that night. Investigators weighed every possible scenario. One theory suggested Ben managed to escape the cave that night, only to meet foul play on the surface, perhaps linked to the pile of cash in his truck, or to debts he reportedly owed. Another theory proposed he faked his own disappearance to flee financial ruin and start over somewhere else. Yet this failed to explain how his heavy tanks ended up deep inside the cave unnoticed. A third theory was that Ben suffered a fatal diving mishap, drowning in the dark waters with his body wedged inside a tight, remote crevice that even elite rescue divers could never reach. Specialists noted that victims often get trapped in cramped passages, heavy silt, or hidden side tunnels that are virtually impossible to search. In 2013, the state of Florida issued a death certificate for Ben McDaniel, officially declaring him dead, even though his body was never recovered, and no actual proof of his demise ever turned up. While Ben vanished in those depths, our next mystery follows a woman terrorized for 7 years before her body was found under uncertain circumstances. For 7 long years, a nurse named Cindy James claimed someone was relentlessly terrorizing her. Sinister phone calls plagued her at night. Her pillows were slashed, phone lines severed, and dead animals were left on her doorstep. On several occasions, she was found tied up and unconscious. Detectives investigated nearly 90 separate reports over those grueling years, launching a massive inquiry that cost British Columbia roughly 1.5 million Canadian dollars. Yet, despite round-the-clock surveillance and countless man-hours, They never found a single trace of her stalker. Then, on June 8, 1989, her body was discovered behind an abandoned house, hogtied with a black nylon stocking choked around her neck, killed by a lethal dose of morphine. The question that still haunts us today is simple. Was Cindy James a victim, or the mastermind behind a 7-year hoax? The 44-year-old pediatric nurse had split from her husband, psychiatrist Roy Makepeace, in 1982 after 6 years of marriage. The terrifying reports of harassment began just 4 months after they separated. It all started with threatening phone calls, a deep male voice warning Cindy that he was watching her every move, knew her schedule, and that she would never be safe. These calls rang out at all hours, robbing her of sleep and keeping her trapped in constant terror and paranoia. Soon the harassment escalated past phone lines into physical break-ins and direct violence. Over the next 7 years, the attacks grew incredibly violent. Cindy even reported waking up to find her pillows slashed with a knife. Her landlines were repeatedly severed, cutting her off from any hope of rescue. She even found dead cats dumped on her lawn, a sick psychological mind game meant to break her. On several occasions, she was discovered unconscious in random spots, bound tightly with nylon stockings or ropes around her neck, covered in fresh bruises. In one brutal incident, she was found with a paring knife stabbed straight through her palm, pinning down a handwritten note that warned, "Now you must die." Over the years, she also survived 3 separate fires at her homes. Investigators could never prove who set those blazes, but they fit the terrifying pattern of escalation. Desperate for answers, therapists put her under hypnosis to help retrieve buried memories about her phantom attacker. And that was when Cindy made a shocking claim that changed everything. She claimed she actually saw her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, murder a local couple and chop up their bodies on Thorman Island back in 1981, before their split. During these deep trance sessions, she provided vivid, graphic details of the alleged crime. But when police searched Thormanby Island and the surrounding waters, they found absolutely nothing. No bodies, no clues, and no matching missing persons reports. Her wild claims against Makepeace could never be backed up by any evidence. Psychologist Dr. Anthony Marcus, who examined Cindy closely, suspected she might suffer from dissociative identity disorder, which causes severe memory gaps and leads people to perform strange, complex acts they have absolutely no memory of doing. As more time passed with no arrests made and 0 suspects in sight, detectives began to wonder, was Cindy staging these terrifying attacks on herself? Investigators noted she never suffered serious injuries, despite the seemingly violent nature of these terrifying incidents. The bindings looked dramatic, but they were always loose enough that she could have tied them herself. No witness ever saw an attacker. Surveillance cameras and police stakeouts never caught a single soul approaching her property or trailing her. Evidence of an outside attacker simply did not exist, despite the most intensive police investigation British Columbia had ever launched to protect one person. On May 25, 1989, Cindy picked up her paycheck, sticking to her usual routine. She was last spotted depositing that check at an ATM at 7:59 that evening, caught on the bank's security footage looking completely calm and normal. 2 weeks later, her body was found in the backyard of an abandoned home in Richmond, British Columbia, hog-tied with a black nylon stocking wound tightly around her neck. A lethal morphine overdose had ended her life. At 10 times the deadly limit, that massive dose would have killed her within minutes of the injection. Crude graffiti spray-painted on a fence near where she lay read in messy letters, "Some female died here." The fresh, dripping paint proved it was written very recently. The coroner's inquest into her death became the longest in British Columbia's history, stretching 40 days and calling more than 80 witnesses to the stand. Forensic experts, detectives, family and close colleagues all testified to what they knew. The jury weighed evidence covering 90 terrifying incidents spanning 7 long years. They closely examined evidence from that final scene. They studied her medical files and psychological evaluations. In the end, jurors could not decide if her death was self-inflicted, an accident, or murder by another hand. They returned an incredibly vague verdict, officially listing her cause of death as an unknown event. Police thoroughly investigated Roy Makepeace as a prime suspect, but never charged him with her death, or the bizarre harassment before it. After she died, her sister found a syringe kit and a glass cutter inside her purse, items suggesting she might have staged some of the incidents herself. The case officially closed in 1989, unsolved. While her case involved years of terrifying reports, this next case features a stalker who phoned a family for years after stealing their daughter. Dorothy Jane Scott's stalker made a chilling promise to her over the phone. He warned her that once he got her alone, he would butcher her body so no one would find her. On the night she vanished, that horrifying threat became reality. For 4 agonizing years afterward, the predator kept calling her tormented parents on a weekly basis, torturing them with sick hints about her fate until her skeletal remains were found in 1984. The 32-year-old single mother worked as a secretary in Anaheim, California, raising her 4-year-old son, Sean, with help from her devoted parents. In late 1979, she started getting anonymous calls at work from a man professing his love. The calls quickly turned dangerous when she did not return his affection. This stalker knew intimate details about her routine, her work schedule, and exactly what she wore. He would phone to describe her daily outfits and movements, proving he was lurking in the shadows, watching constantly. On several occasions, she found dead roses left on her car windshield, a twisted gesture made terrifying by the anonymity and the absolute proof she was being watched. Terrified by the escalating threats, Dorothy moved 3 times in a desperate bid to escape her stalker. But the creepy phone calls always resumed within days, proving he was tracking her every move to her new homes. Soon, the threats grew graphic and violent. He warned her over the line that once he caught her isolated, with no one to help, he would butcher her body into such tiny pieces that no one could ever find or identify her remains. She desperately reported everything to the police, but no arrests were made. The caller stayed too careful, keeping calls short, hiding his identity, and never stepping into the light. Then, on the night of May 28, 1980, Dorothy drove her colleague to the UC Irvine Medical Center emergency room after a nasty spider bite triggered a dangerous, rapidly worsening reaction. Alongside another co-worker, she waited patiently as doctors treated him. Around 11:30 that night, she told her 2 co-workers she would bring her car right to the emergency room doors so her sick colleague would not have to walk too far. Both of them watched from inside the hospital as Dorothy's white Toyota Celica roared into the parking lot, speeding directly to them with bright high beams blinding their view, before veering away sharply at the last second and flying out of the lot. Blinded by those high beams, neither colleague could see who was actually driving. They assumed she was driving wildly because she was stressed, completely unaware they had just witnessed her abduction. At 4:30 in the morning, her burning car was found in an alleyway 10 miles from the clinic. The flames destroyed almost all clues inside. Her remains were not found until August 6, 1984, over 4 years later, when workers digging in the Anaheim hills stumbled across her scattered bones. Her watch, still clinging to the skeletal wrist bones, had stopped at 12:30 in the morning on May 29th, roughly 1 hour after she vanished from the hospital. Throughout those 4 agonizing years, while Dorothy's family searched blindly and wondered if she was dead or alive, the person who took her life kept calling her parents home. The calls came almost every single Wednesday, timed perfectly for when her mother Vera was home alone. They were always too short to trace, using the basic technology of the early 1980s. On some days he claimed she was alive and that he was holding her hostage. Other times he would coldly whisper that he had killed her. He shared secrets about her final moments that had never been released, proving he was indeed the killer. When the Orange County Register ran a major story about Dorothy's disappearance, the mysterious caller phoned their offices directly to speak with the reporter on duty. He confessed flat out to ending her life, adding chillingly that she was his true love. He claimed he had killed her for being unfaithful with another man, which was a total lie since Dorothy was not in a romantic relationship with anyone. Most chillingly, the caller shared secret details about her death that had not been printed in the newspaper story, proving he was the killer. The harassment finally stopped in April 1984, after Dorothy's father Jacob picked up the phone instead of her mother. The stalker clearly only wanted to harass Vera, and he stopped calling once he realized her husband might answer. But the phone rang again once her remains were found and identified, proving the killer was watching the news closely, waiting for the public discovery. Both of her parents died, Jacob in 1994 and Vera in 2002, never knowing who took their daughter's life or who had tormented them with those cruel phone calls. Her son, Sean, who was only 4 when his mother vanished, has spent his adult life searching for answers. He is convinced the person responsible was a man named Mike Butler, a local worker who was allegedly obsessed with Dorothy, a detail her co-workers had noticed and talked about. Butler died in 2014, taking any secrets about his potential guilt to his grave. Today, this cold case remains officially open with local sheriff's investigators, who released a new update in January 2026, revealing they are using artificial intelligence to analyze records from 1979, hoping to spot patterns missed decades ago. But the monster who terrorized Dorothy Jane Scott and tortured her family for 4 years has never been caught or held accountable. While Dorothy's story had a single target, our next case is one of the most horrific family massacres in American history. The Dardeen family massacre remains one of the most horrifying unsolved crimes in American history. Keith Dardeen, his pregnant wife Elaine, and their 3-year-old son Peter were brutally attacked inside their home in Ena, Illinois on November 18, 1987. The baby girl Elaine delivered during the attack was also brutally harmed. The killer chose to use Peter's own birthday present, a baseball bat, as the murder weapon. The crime scene was so disturbing that FBI profilers admitted it defied all their standard analytical methods and psychological frameworks for understanding such extreme violence. The family lived in a mobile home on a quiet, rural property near Route 37 in Jefferson County, a quiet corner of southern Illinois. Keith, 29, worked as a water treatment plant operator, a stable job with regular hours. He had grown increasingly worried about rising crime in the area. 15 terrifying incidents had rocked Jefferson County in just 2 years, an alarming rate for such a rural community. Desperate for safety, Keith was already planning to move his family to Mount Carmel. Just days before the tragedy, he warned his mother that too many strange things were happening, and he had to get his family somewhere safer. Those final words would forever haunt his mother after the horror that unfolded next. On November 18th, Keith missed his shift at the water treatment plant. This was completely uncharacteristic for a man known to be incredibly reliable and punctual. When he did not call in or answer his phone, his worried supervisors knew something was wrong. That evening, Keith's father met sheriff's deputies at the mobile home to perform a welfare check on the family. What they found inside would become one of the most deeply disturbing crime scenes in Illinois history. Inside the bedroom lay the bodies of Elaine, young Peter, and a newborn baby girl. Elaine had been bound with duct tape and beaten so brutally that she went into premature labor during the attack. The newborn baby, who likely lived only moments after her birth, had also been brutally attacked. All 3 bodies had been meticulously posed and tucked into the bed together. This chilling detail suggested the killer had lingered at the scene long after the violence ended. Keith's body was discovered the next day in a wheat field near Rend Lake College, about 5 miles from home. He had been shot 3 times, his body bearing the grim marks of a violent struggle. His car was found parked right outside the Benton police station, 11 miles from the mobile home, with a blood-splattered interior, showing he had been shot while inside the vehicle. The timeline suggested Keith arrived home from work on November 17th, potentially interrupting the intruder or walking right into a nightmare already in motion. He was apparently forced to drive away, shot dead inside his own car, before his body was dumped in that remote wheat field. The crime scene left detectives with bizarre clues that shattered every standard theory of motivation. Absolutely nothing had been stolen from the home. Valuables, including a video recorder, a camera, cash, and jewelry, were left untouched and in plain sight. With no signs of forced entry at any door or window, detectives suspected the family either knew their killer or had simply left the door unlocked. The killer had even partially cleaned up, wiping blood away from several surfaces, showing they felt absolutely no rush to escape and zero fear of getting caught. What disturbed investigators most was evidence that the killer hung around the home both during and after the murders. Even experts from the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, who examined the crime scene photographs, stated on the record that this horrific crime defied all their standard analytical methods and psychological theories of motivation. In 2000, an inmate named Tommy Lynn Sells, awaiting execution on Texas death row for other brutal crimes, confessed to slaughtering the Dardeen family. Sells claimed Keith had invited him inside and made an inappropriate advance, triggering a fit of rage. But when investigators traveled to Texas to interview him, his confession quickly fell apart. He gave wildly inconsistent accounts, changing crucial details every time they spoke. He could not correctly describe the home's layout or point out key details of the scene. He could not provide any details that had not already been reported in the media. Most importantly, he could not explain how he traveled to rural Illinois from Texas or how he managed to escape. Sells was executed in 2014 for his other heinous crimes, yet he was never charged in the Dardine family case because detectives simply did not find his confession believable. Keith's mother, Joanne, turned into a tireless advocate, demanding justice for her son and his family. She gathered 3,000 signatures on a petition to get the case on the Oprah Winfrey Show, hoping national exposure would bring in leads. The show's producers turned down the request, claiming the crime was far too brutal for their daytime television audience. Joanne passed away without ever knowing who took her son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and the granddaughter she never got to meet. 37 years have passed since that dark November night in 1987. The case still sits with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, which holds over 20 binders packed with investigative files, witness statements, forensic reports, and old evidence. DNA samples from the scene are still preserved in cold evidence storage, waiting for the day when advanced technology or a fresh lead might finally identify the killer. Eventually, the Dardine family's mobile home was hauled away, but the land remains a quiet rural field where an entire family was wiped out in a single night of brutal violence that has never been solved. While the Dardine case went cold for decades, we're about to see another mystery that had a massive breakthrough in late 2024. Bever Yoros. For 6 decades, the brutal end of 16-year-old Beverly Jarrus's life remained Ohio's longest-running cold case. Then, in late 2024, Garfield Heights police announced they had finally identified a major person of interest, a man who was roughly Beverly's age when the crime occurred, a close friend who visited her home regularly, and someone who reportedly always carried a knife and rope. This announcement followed advanced DNA testing that pulled new genetic material from evidence saved since December 1964. The Marymount High School junior was a quiet, studious girl who preferred classical music over the rock and roll of her peers, dreaming of becoming a Latin teacher. In the weeks leading up to her death, she received mysterious gifts, including a ring and a bracelet. Both were left mysteriously at the family's back door with no note. Along with this, the household started getting 10 to 12 silent hang-up phone calls every day. The caller never spoke, only breathing into the line before hanging up. Both Beverly and her mother Carol told relatives they felt a dark foreboding, a chilling sense that something terrible was approaching, even though they could not explain what they feared or why they felt that way. On December 28, 1964, Beverly walked home alone around 1 p.m. while her parents worked, keeping to her normal routine during winter break. Her close friend Barbara arrived at the Jarros residence at 1:25 p.m. to pick her up for a planned shopping trip. Barbara knocked on the front door and rang the bell repeatedly for about 5 minutes. She got no answer, but she heard heavy thumping sounds from inside the house and noticed music playing at an incredibly high volume, far louder than Beverly ever played it. Barbara assumed her friend was just mad about her being late and was ignoring the door on purpose. Hurt and confused by what she thought was Beverly's rudeness, Barbara turned around and went back home. She would carry the heavy guilt of that single decision for the rest of her life. Later that afternoon, Beverly's father came home from work and found his daughter's body in her upstairs bedroom. She was lying face down on the floor, partially unclothed. She had been strangled with a 66-inch rope and stabbed between 34 and 42 times. According to the coroner's horrific count, investigators found 12 defensive wounds on her hands, showing where she tried to shield herself from the blade. The autopsy evidence clearly showed she had fought desperately for her life. Crucially, there was no sign of forced entry at any door or window in the home, which suggests she let her attacker in willingly, someone she knew and trusted enough to invite inside while she was home alone. The killer had brought the rope to the house, a clear sign of cold premeditation. The rope was identified as a window sash cord made by Shuford Mills Company, a common household item, but this one had been pre-tied in a square knot before the killer arrived, proving the murder was planned in advance. Beverly's private diary vanished from her bedroom, lost forever to time. Police believed the killer snatched the journal to bury whatever she wrote about them, detailing tense encounters or unwanted threats. It could have named her stalker directly, exposing the dangers she was facing before it was too late. In 1965, mere months after her death, a man named William Rehard surfaced, facing charges in another crime. He shocked detectives by admitting he took Beverly's life. He pointed police toward a bus station locker, where he claimed to have hidden a knife in her clothes. Rehard even took a polygraph test and passed with flying colours. But before investigators could dig deeper or verify his confession, Rehard took his own life. The crucial evidence he pointed them to was supposedly destroyed shortly after he died. Yet, no official files explaining why or how those critical items were ruined have ever been found. In December 2024, police revealed that advanced vacuum DNA testing technology, which pulls genetic material from old evidence that normal tests miss, finally generated fresh DNA profiles from 60-year-old clues. Now, investigators are running tight undercover stings and watching a key suspect around the clock. This person was Beverly's age back in 1964, a close family friend who visited her home and often carried a knife and rope. They also discovered his alibi for December 28, 1964, was full of holes. Worse, his close friends now refused to speak with police or answer questions, raising massive red flags. Beverly's sister, Carol, now in her 70s, has spent her whole life waiting to find out what happened to her sibling. While the search for truth continues, that is all we have for you today. Thanks for watching, and click here to find another mystery.